You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jesper Schmidt.
Hello, I am Jesper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 45 of the AmWritingFantasy podcast, and we are going to discuss ways in which you can write not only believable, but also compelling and rich dialogue.
Yay, we're going to talk about dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah. Like podcast is also a bit of a dialogue, so I guess I guess that works.
Yeah, we'll be talking about talking.
Yeah, that almost sounds a bit weird.
I'm sure we'll work it out.
Yeah. But dialogue is important, so I'm looking forward to get into that. But before we get that far, I have to say, I mean, we're actually recording off schedule right now, because normally we record these podcasts on Mondays, and today it's a Wednesday because I had to shift things around because this week here in Denmark, the kids are off school.
Ooh. Is it a holiday for you guys, or?
Yeah, it's a school holiday this week.
Oh, nice.
So they are off school from school, and then Monday we tried to do like a family day and just do some stuff together. So we went to the cinema and watched the movie together with the kids, which was nice. And then yesterday, after work, after I was done with my work day, I then drove our kids off and delivered them to my mother's place. But that's across the country. So I think by US standards, it's not that far. But here in Denmark, it's a 2.5-hour drive each way, which is quite a lot in this country. So I drove them there in the afternoon. Then I had some dinner, and then I drove back. So I was back here home at midnight yesterday. And then I was up this morning, and I think I've been working for 11 hours today. So I can feel it a bit now.
So if you get a little loopy or low energy towards the end, we'll know why. But yeah, driving 2.5 hours, I think that's sort of like driving across most states. But I was going to say Texas, I think is 8 hours across. So you're a smaller state is what that's be like here.
Yeah, our country here is not that big, to be honest. But that's actually nice when you have to get around, right? And you don't have to drive that far.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think I think a cozy community and even cozy states, because it feels more like, a community. You get to know places really intimately. So I think that's actually a huge benefit. I can't tell you how many, as we were driving the last 3 years across the entire country, how many times we met people, from the Midwest who'd never seen the ocean, or maybe they'd only seen Lake Superior. Just people who've never seen the mountains or never seen the desert. And, I'm really awed, my husband and I, to have seen as much as we have across the United States. So that's kind of changes your perspective a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, for sure, here in this country, if you don't travel, then outside the country to other countries, then you will never see a mountain. That's just impossible.
It's true.
We have something we call a mountain in it's in Jutland, in the middle of Jutland, and I'm going off memory here, and I could be wrong, but it's like 250 meters high or something like that. So that's our mountain.
It's like a hill.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why every time I sent pictures of the mountains and the Rockies, you're like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, I love mountains. We went to Greece 2 years ago, and there was mountains outside the windows. And also when we went to New Zealand 2 years ago, I love that the nature stuff, that it's so different from my own country here.
Well, you make me think when we finally get to meet up in person, we'll have to make it somewhere in the Rockies just so you can see some mountains.
Yeah, that's cool. Or a huge forest and stuff like that is also cool.
Yeah. There's so many spectacular places like that. Glacier National Park, for anyone who's in Montana, I think is one of the prettiest national parks in the United States. It is just awe-inspiring, astounding. And I have to admit, the first time I saw it was just in the fall, right after a light snow, and all the mountaintops were white and the trees still had some color. And it was just like, wow, it was amazing. Amazing. So I cannot wait to someday get back there, hopefully soon. But it's funny. So you're talking about your week, and you know this. A lot of the readers or listeners will not, but I've been actually helping out at a cafe. It's actually a friend's downtown, and it's only been open for like 5 or 6 months. And here, recording this is only like mid-October, so it's released, much later. But we're just getting into the height of Halloween here in Maine, and we just had this huge festival called Pumpkin Fest. And so there's these massive, I think the winner was 1,800 pounds. That was the largest pumpkin grown. So they have these massive pumpkins and they put them all downtown and they decorate them. There was like lanterns, fish, there's a dragon, there's Audrey from the Little Shop of Horrors, there's hedgehogs. It's just so much fun. But the fun thing is I love tea. I'm not a coffee drinker, though my husband is. And then I'm a baker, so they've made huge use of my baking skills. But to be thrown into a cafe setting and trying to learn this espresso machine and what a macchiato is, I couldn't even pronounce macchiato like 5 days ago, a cortado, and actually kind of starting to pick up what some of these drinks are is really fun, and it's humbling. I think anyone who thinks that they are top of their game in something in life needs to go do something entirely new, a brand new enterprise at least once a year, so that you can be a little bit humbled and realize you're not top of everything. You may be an awesome whatever you are, calligrapher, cross-stitcher, cross-country skier, I don't know, whatever you're so obvious. Hopefully a writer, if you're listening to this, you may be so very good, but it is so humbling to throw yourself back into something entirely new, especially in a sink or swim situation with all these people coming in from the parade, and it was just a madhouse. But it was kind of fun. I actually managed to keep up with the 20-somethings I was working with. So, that's another humbling experience when they're talking about what they want to major in. You're like, oh,
yeah.
Oh, back in the day.
I don't drink coffee either, and I half of what you just mentioned I don't understand either. So.
No, I will say the biggest surprise for me is one of my coworkers said, "You've got to try a dirty chai." I'm like, "What the heck is a dirty chai?"
What's that?
They knew I like tea. So a dirty chai is a hot chai with a shot of espresso in it. And as far as I'm concerned, tea and coffee should never meet. I've sent back water.
That was just what I was thinking too.
Yeah, I've sent back water that'd been run through the coffee pot going, I do not want coffee water. I want real water. No. I am such a tea snob. Totally I know, I admit that. But oh my gosh, dirty chais. Especially I do decaf because I cannot do espressos. But it tastes like kind of like a rich, warm pumpkin pie. You don't taste the coffee. It just makes it deeper and richer. So anyone else out there who is crazy like me and thinks coffee and tea should never meet, try a dirty chai. Or maybe don't, because I have to admit now I'm slightly addicted, and that's going to go with me for a long after the cafe. Yeah. It'll stick with me for a while.
No, just wait, before you know of it, then you will start drinking coffee as well, and then you're addicted to that.
No, I only drink coffee and only decaf again, on rainy days, because to me, coffee tastes like mud, and there's just something about muddy, cold days. I'm like, I could go for a cup of coffee. It kind of feels like that's the weather. But I have to admit, a nice Earl Grey is much better on a rainy day.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's a lot of stuff. I mean, and I think we both have had quite busy times going on. Actually, over the past week as well, not only this week, but also last week, I've been preparing notes for our completely free course that we are going to release probably, in 2020.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been really busy, but I thought that maybe I should just give a very, very quick, short overview of the modules that I'm currently making the notes for. Do you think that would be good?
I think that'd be awesome. I know you showed them to me, and I just cannot wait for this course. It's going to be so awesome.
Yeah. So maybe I could just do a quick rundown. Of course, for the listener, it's going to take a while before all this is done, but maybe just as a short teaser or something here. But so module 1 we entitle "Why 2% of authors succeed and 98% don't." And in that module, we're going to share a bit of the myth that people believe about self-publishing and what it really takes to make it. And that's followed by module 2, which is the mindset that most authors don't understand. And I guess that title pretty much says it all. So apart from making you understand how you should understand your future career as an author, we also share our top 5 tips you need to know in order to make it. And that is followed by module 3, which is the author platform. And I think author platform is like a term that is often thrown around, but here in this module 3, at least, we're going to lay out exactly what it is, how to build it, and how to make it work for you.
Yeah, fantastic.
And module 4 is how do online retailers like Amazon actually work. So we're going to talk about the online landscape of book selling retailers and explain which factors will actually affect your sales. And I think that one, module 4, is pretty tightly knitted together with module 5, which is Amazon Explains. Amazon Explained is what we called it, because basically, whether we like it or not, Amazon is incredibly important to all indie authors, and it's therefore really important to understand how the algorithm actually works and how to make your books appear in searches and a lot more. So, and yeah, also, I'm going to share how you can become an Amazon best-selling author as well in that module. And then maybe your favorite topic, Autumn, module 6 is book covers.
Yay! I love book covers.
Yeah. And they are also amazingly important. So we're going to go deep into the topic of book covers in module 6 and explain everything you need to know about that. And the same can be said about module 7 on book descriptions. That's also important. So
Absolutely.
we'll also cover that. And module 8, I have a feeling that this is one of those where some love it, some hate it. It's about advertising because I mean, in here in 2019, nobody can make it without advertising.
No.
So there's an entire module dedicated to that topic. And then once we have read or written our books, then we need to launch them. So module 9 is going to share some proven strategies on how to make your book launches successful. And then module 10 is the cornerstone you can't live without. Can you guess what that is? You can probably remember.
Oh, shoot, I do remember, but now I can't think of the... It's like
you
on the tip of my tongue. You didn't say this was a quiz show.
No, indeed. That was not fair of me. It's email marketing, email lists.
Yes, that I remember that one now. Which is only fitting because I only just sent out my newsletter yesterday. So
right, indeed, yeah. So we're gonna share some facts about email marketing in that module 10, and then of course, and if you have not done so already, you need to get going and get your email list started today.
Yes.
So all of that we're gonna give for free.
I can't believe we're giving all this away for free. This is such
I don't know. We're a bit crazy.
Course. It would be great.
We are a bit insane, I think.
I think we are, but I've always said that, so that's all right.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I've looked around a bit. Of course, we've this is the way we have decided to structure it and what we have decided to do. But if we compare to slightly similar courses, I guess we could call it. I've looked around, and they usually charge for about $500 for this type of information. So yeah, I don't know. We are stupid.
Or they're going to be mad at us. So
yeah. But it's still early days, and but I have my notes completed for half the course by now, so we are making good progress.
Yay!
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy podcast.
So maybe just in prolongation, can you say that? Prolongation? I don't know.
It works.
Whatever. But adding on to the free course that I was just talking about, we also I shared it the course modules on Patreon as well to our Patreon supporters, and we really got a lot of nice messages back. So that was nice.
Yeah, they're really excited about this course, and I mean, I'm excited about the course, but it's always good. I mean, good to get feedback and find out it's really going to be valuable, and really appreciate hearing that. So it makes us more excited to get it done.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, at the point in time where you're listening to this podcast episode, those who support us on Patreon have already known about this course or these course modules that I just shared for several weeks, because we do try to maintain a close relationship to the people on Patreon. And apart from the awesome rewards that we're offering there, we also share dedicated posts about writing every week. So there's a lot of additional tips and advice that you can pick up on Patreon. And we even had our monthly Q&A session recently. So go check out Patreon via the link in the show notes. And there's a lot of help you can get there for as little as $1 a month.
Yes, it was really awesome to see the comments on the course. And actually, because when we're listening to this, when we're recording it, is going to be different from when we launched. But as we're recording this, we only just released episode 42, which was the one where I really gave some personal tips and feedback on how overwhelmed, how my summer was going. And the comments, of course, Pat, the Patreon numbers got that early, so I got to get that before I hit the general public on Monday. So it was nice to get those, like, yes, thank you. It's so important. But then even once it hit the general public, was a general release, the comments I've gotten back from so many authors and people who are saying this is not just, authors, but so much of today's life is dealing with being overwhelmed and too many tasks and not knowing how to sort them out. So one, I appreciate all the positive messages with people thanking me for sharing that, but also just wanted to give another shout out to everyone else. If you're feeling overwhelmed and just struggling, you're not alone. I've heard from so many people that if it's not something you're going through now, it's something you've gone through. So yeah, always reach out, talk to someone, take a deep breath. I used to joke when I was at my day job and was a manager that if it wasn't life, death, or world peace, I was not going to get worked up. So, reach out to people, keep that in mind, and realize that, if no one's going to die, if, you're not going to save someone's life with this news, or, you're not going to solve all the problems in the world and all wars will immediately stop, just take a breath. It's going to be okay to take, a few minutes off, a half an hour off, a day off, and get your head on straight, or at least get back to feeling a little bit like yourself. Don't keep pressing yourself to the point of collapse. There's nothing to be gained in that.
No. Yeah, I'm not good at that either, to be honest. So I'm listening to your advice here as well.
Oh, you better. Well, I heard you're going to the movies, maybe with your wife while your kids are away. So I think that's a very good thing.
Exactly.
And on to today's topic.
Dialogue.
Yes.
This is I guess this conversation can go in all kinds of directions.
It can. Dialogue is so important, from a great way to share character stuff, a great way to break up the prose in your novel, giving out information and hinting at things. I mean, it's so exciting and so important. It's an amazingly useful tool if you can get it right.
Yeah, that's the trick with all of the writing stuff, really.
It really is.
Yeah, but I think as well, when we're talking about dialogue, we can get all into how to write the good dialogue and all that. But even before we get that far, I think there is a mechanical point around dialogue to make as well. And what I mean by that is that apart from dialogue keeping the story interesting and moving quickly for the reader, all those white spaces that appears when you start adding dialogue and the shorter lines that appears on the page, just the mechanics part of that, I don't know if you can call it mechanics, but once you read pages in a book where, okay, here's a lot of white space, there's shorter lines, you can see the dialogue is going on, it just makes for a greater reader experience. So there is that added benefit for dialogue, which has nothing to do with writing the dialogue, but I think that's an important point to make as well.
I do too. I mean, it definitely breaks up the page visually, just like if anyone writes blog posts and stuff. There's a lot of techniques to making sure you have white space around what you're writing, or breaking it up with quotes and things. Dialogue does the exact same thing. You have pages and pages of prose, and plus by following dialogue correctly and having lots of line breaks and the shorter sentences, you actually add to your page count. So, I know a lot of first-time authors, and they're like, how many pages is this going to be when it becomes a novel? And, add more dialogue. You'll actually get a little bit longer extended page count than you might have if you, even despite your word count. So it's kind of fun that way.
Right, yeah, true. Although I would say I don't really care how long it's going to be. I mean, it's as long as it takes to tell the story, right?
That is actually a very good comment, and one that they've been debating on the AmWritingFantasy Facebook group, I just noticed, so that was kind of very funny.
Okay, cool. So I've sort of prepared some notes or a list of different things that I probably have like 10 different topics here or something, but I don't know. Where do we want to start? Should I just grab one and then you take some of your points as well, or how do you want to do it?
Yes, why don't you, since you are the list maker, why don't we start with that? And like I mentioned before we started,
that's my job.
That is your job. You're good at making lists. I've written, I think, a series of 4 or 5 blog posts that are on the AmWritingFantasy website. So I have those, and yes, it's going to be almost like it is going to be a little bit like a quiz show. You start with your list, and I will chime in with the tips I've done and add to even the ones I added on the blog post.
Okay. Yeah, so there's no particular order to this at all. This is just, it's going to go a bit here and a bit there. But these are just the points that I noted down or that I want to make. And I think the first one I could start with is that all dialogue needs to have some sort of purpose to it.
Yes.
If you compare to real life, when we start talking to people, a lot of the times, at least if it's not like somebody you know really well, you'll start talking about pleasantries, like talking about the weather or some ice-breaking stuff, and all that you need to kill when it comes to dialogue between characters, even if they don't know each other. We don't want to read about what they think about the weather and all that stuff. Yeah. That's really boring. So you need to build towards something concrete within that scene with your dialogue, so that there is no pointless dialogue. That's really important.
I agree. And one of my least favorite pieces of advice on writing dialogue is to listen to people talking around you. That is horrible. Have you listened to people talking around you? They usually don't make any sense. They're using like OMG and lots of ums and weird, you can't follow. Often with writing dialogue, you actually need to add in some explanation. And it's like jumping to the heart of a personal to person conversation between people who either know each other really well, but you still need to explain something. It's totally different from listening to someone if you're sitting at a cafe, because there's a lot of pointless dialogue that goes on at cafes. You have to have a purpose, and there's a lot of different purposes you could have. It could be sharing information, it could be character building, it could be something humorous. But there is a purpose, and you got to get to the heart of it very quickly. You can't sit there and kind of beat about the bush and, talk about, like you said, the weather. What are we having for dinner? Why is he late? Unless, of course, the why he's late is really important because he just got eaten by an ogre. Okay, so...
that's better. Or dragon.
Oh, dragon.
No, that actually, puts me right on the path to the next point that I was making, because... when you listening to others or listening to real speech is indeed, I was also going to say that it's a bad idea. First of all, there might be a lot of slang words, and you don't want to have a lot of slang words in your writing because readers don't understand what's going on. It seems confusing. So you don't want that. And you also want to kill any filler words, yes, or at least reduce them to the absolute minimum. So when we're talking here on the podcast, we have our speech, what is it called? Like, not limitations, but we have our habits in how we are speaking.
Correct.
And either some people say a lot of or some people say like all the time, or whatever it may be. But we need to kill all that stuff when we are writing dialogue. And you're not supposed to write realistic speech with a lot of those filler words, but you're more supposed to write interesting dialogue, I would say, or interesting things that the characters are saying that leads towards some sort of purpose.
Exactly. I read a book once where they literally had someone, instead of writing exclaimed in glee, which would have been fine, they actually used the dialogue of wee, and I was like, oh, this is horrible. Use exclaimed in glee. Don't use actual descriptions of we's or ums or likes. And I know a lot of people want to add in like some kind of characteristic phrase. Well, that's fine, but you still don't put it in every single sentence. And if you're from the
No.
80s and you remember the Valley Girl phase where it was like this, like that, that's so cool. You don't need to add that to your dialogue either, unless you happen to be writing a really obnoxious teenager. And even then, please keep it to a minimum, just, twice in a chapter just to show it. And that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can write the here and there in a rare occasion. If you're trying to make a point that the character is really unsure in the situation or something, then here and there it can be okay. Mm-hmm. But you really need to keep it short, and you need to let dialogue flow naturally, and then get to the point instead of all that blah 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 stuff. So yeah, that's just it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what's the next one?
Next one, let me see here. So next one is that, of course, this is a bit of a, almost formatting type of way, but it's also a good idea to make sure that you give each speaker their own paragraph so that it's easy to distinguish who's actually saying something. Because I don't know, and sometimes in books, it's not really clear who's saying what, and you go back and you reread the section 2 times to understand who said that. And that is really annoying.
It is.
So you don't want to do that.
No, it can throw the reader totally out of the story because they're trying to figure out who's talking and who actually has the information. And that's horrible. I mean, this one is so important. I actually wrote an entire blog post on formatting. And yeah, every speaker should get their own, paragraph and then a space. And so, yeah, you might end up having, 3 words and maybe a dialogue tag or an action tag, or maybe not, depending on how many people are speaking. So you might have 3 words and then you're hitting, the paragraph return again for the next person speaking. That's okay. That's like what we were talking at the top when we first started. It creates white space. It's a visual break. You do not need to make dialogue look as packed as an info dump, which shouldn't be in your novel anyway. You don't want it to look like this heavy prose. It should be this little, almost like poetry. Lots of spaces and white and different varying sentence lengths. That's kind of what makes it fun.
Yeah, and that varying sentence length is a good point as well. And especially also don't make the really, really long monologues. I mean, nobody wants to read that either.
No, there should definitely
be even annoying in real life.
Yeah, that's true. Very, very true. That one is so that is a real life example you can follow, but definitely back and forth. You want to have some play of words. And again, that's what makes dialogue fun, because it's purpose, like I said, it can actually have multiple purposes. So one of them should definitely be, ramping up tension maybe and getting some sparring going. And for that, you're going to have really short sentences.
True. And I don't know, this next one, it might sound a bit weird when we're talking about dialogue, but it's still applicable. And that is, don't forget to use silence as well. It can work really well when a character suddenly just falls silent instead of arguing. That works really well.
It was. I have a character from my dystopian post-apocalyptic series that he is a master. I wish I could master this. Oh my gosh, I try to channel him all the time. But Jared, he knows that people will just start talking to fill that silence. And eventually they're going to reveal what it is he's waiting for them to reveal. He's so darn good. But yes, that is perfect to have one character who is basically controlling the sentence, or maybe just they're not ready to say something. That's fantastic. They can just fall silent. And I think that is fantastic advice.
Yeah. And I think if you look at maybe the reason why a lot of the time we don't think about writing silence, that sounds really weird. Maybe a lot of the times why we don't think about it is because in real life it feels extremely awkward. Now, I've been negotiating contracts and stuff like that with clients in my day job thing for many times. And one of the things, it is incredibly difficult to do, but one of the things that works wonderfully well is if you're negotiating something and you've made your points, and then of course the other party will argue that they want something else. A lot of the times it works amazingly just to keep quiet. Just sit there. because people cannot take it that there is just this silence, so they'll start talking about something, and sooner or later they will start giving you something because well, okay, maybe we can do like this and that, and yeah, okay, maybe we could, of course you do try when negotiating, of course you are trying to make a win-win situation rather than a win-lose situation, but if they're really not budging anywhere, sometimes it works wonderfully well to just keep silent and let them do the talking, because they're going to come up with some suggestion all of a sudden, and then you have something to work from.
I have this visualization of someone going into their like annual review now, and their boss is telling them all this stuff, and they just kind of sit there like, your point?
Yeah.
All right, I'm not sure if we're giving that kind of advice right now, but consider silence the next time you're in a tough negotiation.
Yeah, I'm going to give you like a $20 pay raise, and then you just sit there for silent looking at the boss. Are you happy with that? Still silence. See how that works?
I love it. Yeah. How about 25? Does that make you happy?
Yeah, still silence.
If anyone uses this technique, please let us know.
Yeah, I would love to hear a story about that.
All right, so the next tip.
Next tip is, remember that in many cases, actually, characters won't actually say precisely what they're thinking, and this is also what we do in real life all the time. But if you are making dialogue where the character is just laying out exactly how they feel about something and exactly what their plan is, it feels extremely unrealistic, and people don't talk like that.
No.
So you shouldn't do that in writing either.
Exactly. And so many people are not really that self-aware. So your characters shouldn't be that self-aware. Maybe they're just like, something's bothering me, or I don't think we should go that way. And they're not really articulating why or what their overall plans or overall hopes are. Maybe it should just be, those kind of loose terms like, hopefully we can make it through the pass if we leave early in the morning. That's better than saying we will get up in the morning and we're going to go to the pass and we're going to get through. And no, it sounds better if you at least make some possibilities and kind of couch it in those little terms of not quite sure. Though I have to admit, I sometimes also say when you're writing, get rid of those questionable things. People don't do things halfway. But when it comes to dialogue, that's okay. You can have some quasi, I'm not really sure of statements, but when you're doing action, you either do it or you don't do it. Don't do these almost. Get rid of all the almost unless it's in dialogue, then it's okay.
Yeah, and sometimes as well, people say one thing, but they mean something else. So that's also something to consider.
Absolutely. And it's also just, it's great too if you're in the point of view of someone who's a very powerful character and a great manipulator. So you can have them thinking one thing, or, you could have them really manipulating through their dialogue, and that's really fun for the reader to start figuring out that, wait, no, they were thinking something else, and now they're doing this. Why are they doing this? Curiosity, that drives readers nuts and keeps them reading.
Yeah, indeed. So I have one more, and then you can fill in if you have more after that. Yeah. You probably have. But this one is it's one that can really drive me nuts sometimes.
Oh yeah.
These are speech tags.
That's actually what I was going to bring up too. So I know there's this huge advice out there that said always use said. And I've gotten into a lot of debate about this with other authors. So what do you think? Should you always use said?
No, absolutely not. I think it's on writing that, if the book from Stephen King. I think it's him saying in that book that if you're writing he said or she said, it's almost invisible to the reader because our eye sort of just skims over it. We register if it says he or she, but otherwise we don't really notice it. And I think there is some truth to that. But if that's all you're doing, there's not much variance in your speech tags, and there should be.
Yes. And I think especially for fantasy, we have a little bit more allowance to use the adverbs, the adjectives, add in those descriptors, than say if you're writing, scientific something. But it's definitely, I think we're allowed to be a little more flavorful with our words, and that's kind of fun. I think it's a lot more fun. So yeah, I agree. The seds, maybe 50% if of the actual dialogue tags, which again, you don't need to just use dialogue tags, but definitely you don't have to use set 100% of the time. It's just boring.
It is absolutely, and I think the other thing, and this is the part that drives me nuts sometimes, is when speech tags are used incorrectly. And by that, what I mean is that if you're using the ly adverbs, so you're saying like he said angrily or she said sadly or something like that, it drives me absolutely bonkers. And I think there is this tendency to use those ly adverbs because that's how we think that it shows emotion, but in fact it doesn't. No. We're back to the show don't tell, which I think we have mentioned probably 100 times already, but it is just much more engaging if you're using the actions instead. You can describe how the facial expressions are showing that he's angry or anything like that, or maybe a tear rolls down the cheek because the person is sad, or they slam the door, or whatever they do. But that sort of dialogue tag is a million times better than writing "she said sadly." It's like, what the... And I was just about to say beep.
I'll do a beep for you. No, I agree. I think in the blog post on adverbs, I wrote that if the first time the reader hears that the character is angry is because of using shouted angrily, which I hopefully no one would ever use shouted angrily. But if that's the first time the reader sees that the character is angry is because you just told them in a dialogue tag with an adverb, oh, you're not doing this right. No, it's not supposed to work that way. You're supposed to be showing the emotion. You could use shouted instead of said. That's a great one. But slam the cup against the floor, hit the wall, gestures, moving so quickly that they knock something over to show, some kind of emotion. And those are often called action tags. So if you said, I don't know what you mean, and then said, as he slammed, the cup onto the table, that is an action tag. And you immediately relate that whoever is speaking is also doing the action. So of course this would all be in just one paragraph, and then when you switch to the next speaker, you go to the next paragraph. But those are action tags versus the dialogue tags like shouted, swore, whispered. Those are dialogue tags, and they're you can intersperse, use one or the other. Some people prefer to use one. I think a mix is great. And again, if there's only two people speaking and they're alternating pretty regularly, you can go a couple lines without using any tags, as long as you either throw in an action tag, make sure the reader doesn't get too confused. You don't go like 6 lines with nothing. But definitely like 3 or 4, sometimes that is visually fun and makes it go really quick when two people are having a very intense exchange, to just skip the dialogue or action tags, as long as it's only 2 people. Once you throw in the third, you're going to have to make sure everyone knows who's talking.
Yeah, I mean, and of course it can be difficult to come up with new stuff or new ways to express emotions and all that, and we can also end up repeating a lot of the same stuff because that's just how we work when we don't think about it. But I actually wanted to mention, and I can put the link in the show notes to these, but there are some really, really awesome books that you can buy that it's going to help you a lot. And these are, it's like a series, but it's written by Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi. I think that's how you say it. But it's basically, you can get like a writer's guide to character flaws, a writer's guide to character attributes. So these are called the negative trait thesaurus and the positive trait thesaurus.
Oh, right.
And what you can do with these books is that basically it just has tons of different traits. So I can look up anything, like I can see, okay, ignorant, for example, and then this I'm just doing it now, of course you can't see it, but so it'll have like a whole list of like 40 different associated behaviors to being ignorant. And then there'll be like 40 different things that you can then use as inspiration on how to show it when when writing.
That's fantastic.
And how the character might react, and how they might, what they might do, and so forth and so forth. So it's really amazing, and it works extremely well, especially when you're in the editing phase and you're trying to make your dialogue tags better. Then use these books as inspiration, and try to vary your dialogue tags. It really helps a lot, these books. So I'll put a link to them in the show notes, so if you're interested.
Yeah, and are they the ones who also wrote the emotional thesaurus? Because I know I've seen that one. Yes. They're fantastic inspiration for really enhancing your writing and being able to show emotions other than the heart chest, the heart beating in the chest and the brows scrunching. There's so much more to emotions.
Biting your lip and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other ones in there. And you can pick some of those tweaks and give one specifically to a character that helps with your character building. And I think that's, it's fantastic, and they're great books.
Absolutely. Okay, that's the end of my list, Autumn. Do you have more about dialogue?
I think I go into a little bit more in the blog post. Maybe we should, link to them, or at least tell folks, check out the AmWritingFantasy website and look up the dialogue tips there, because there's 4 or 5 blog posts that we've covered. And they actually, part of it is like just taking the same set of words and slowly adding to them so that you can see dialogue developing into something that's, different and more concrete. And that might give you some tips too to get going. And there, if you want more questions on action tags and dialogue tags and when you should or shouldn't use adverbs, that is all posted in there. So that'll help make it a little bit more clear if you're visual and listening in and want to look at something. They're there.
Yeah. Well, of course, we always want to make things easy, so we'll put a link to those articles or blog posts in the show notes as well. So there's a lot of good stuff you can link, or you can click in the show notes this time around and check out yourself. So that was all about dialogue, and next week we are going to have another amazing episode. So see you there.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the Writing Fantasy podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jesper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the Writing Fantasy podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.